Holy shit. Didn't see you there, folks. You scared me. I'm just sitting here. I'm talking with my good friend, Matthew Brockmeyer. He is an accomplished horror author and podcast creator. He does a lot of true crime, serial killers, freaks of nature, anomalous kind of one-off kind of cannibalistic, I don't know, weirdos and stuff. I'm Chris Jeffries, Homeless Romantic Podcast. So we're going to talk about William S. Burroughs. Who the hell is William S. Burroughs?
William Seward Burroughs was a beatnik writer in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. You know who William Burroughs is. Don't give me that.
Yeah, he lived a long time, and he was he went through the 50s and what all the hippies were doing. Right before the hippies came there, we had the beatniks in the 50s, and they would hitchhike around and do meth, drop dexedrine inhalers into their coffee and drink them, and then drive around and write books and hitchhike and shit like this. And William S. Burroughs was around during this time. Other prominent names like who wrote how? Allen Ginsberg and
yeah, that was his best friend. They were best friends until the day they died. They were like kind of in love with each other. William Burroughs was absolutely in love with Allen Ginsberg. Broke William Burroughs' heart. So.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
to quote Allen Ginsberg, I'll give you a quote. I don't want your old man dick anymore.
Well, they were beatniks. They were swinging at the time. They didn't.
And that's when Burroughs took off to Morocco, man.
Well, we're skipping ahead a little bit. So tell me a little bit, where is he from? Where did he get his roots from? And why is he so twisted?
All right. So he's a little bit older than those other guys. He was kind of like the elder statesman among them. He's got, I think he's 12, 13 years older than Allen Ginsberg. So he was born in St. Louis, Missouri. And he was a bit of a little wild child as a kid. He says he always knew he was gay, always knew he was different, which would have been difficult back then. He went to school in Los Alamos. Yes, and it was this private boarding school that was made to turn your boys into men. Or like if you got like an effeminate little boy, you know what I mean? You send him off there to the desert and like they teach him to shoot. They teach him how to farm. They teach him how to ride a horse, and it'll make a man out of him. And he said it was rife with child molesters, of course. And and that is actually where. And so then when World War II eventually started, that is where they went to that school. And said the school's closed, the government's buying it, bought that school, and that's where the nuclear bomb was made. And that was a huge significance to Burroughs because he always thought that the nuclear bomb defined not only his generation, but a turning point in time, like a before and after kind of time, before the nuclear bomb and after. And he was really obsessed with the nuclear age and what it meant. And it really meant something to him that it was created there where he went to high school.
Wow. It's symbolic. Like they bombed your school because it wasn't doing no good, no how. Might as well just sell it to the government. That's too bad.
Yeah, I guess so. He hated it. He hated it there. He had his first homosexual encounter there, and then which boys I guess would do. They're all alone. They're just but for him it was different. He was in love with this boy, and when that boy realized they weren't just getting their kicks off, but William Burroughs was actually affectionate toward him, like was endeared to him. He started making fun of him. All the kids did. They all started, it's one thing to like jack your friend off. Yeah, that's fine. But to like actually be in love with them, that was fucked up. And he actually asked his parents to come get him. And he didn't graduate there. He left early and had to get a private tutor to graduate. But he got a private tutor that was excellent at getting students into Harvard. And that private tutor got him into Harvard. And so he went to Harvard.
Nice. So this is where he is. I mean, anybody who goes to Harvard, your name is kind of your destiny is written in the stars. You could do anything. You could become like Elizabeth Holmes, and
she went to she went here to school here in California, bud.
Oh, that was Stanford. Yeah, sorry. But you go to these Ivy Leagues, and all of a sudden,
it should be true, right? But he was so William Burroughs about everything. He was an outcast. He was a weirdo. He didn't participate in any student curriculum whatsoever. He didn't play a sport. He barely left his room. He had a ferret and a gun. And the ferret used to weird everybody out. He accidentally shot his firearm off in his room, which also got him in a lot of trouble. And he did do a lot, obviously a lot of studying of English literature. He memorized tons of Shakespeare when he was in Harvard, and he would be able to recite it till the day he died. And he always says that Shakespeare one of his biggest influences. So he got all that there, and he learned a lot about writing, but he was nondescript. People don't really remember him. The one guy, listen to this. So after he had graduated, he couldn't get a job. He was doing this. He wanted to be a spy because after he graduated, he went to Europe and he was living out there, and he could see, I'm saying he's older than all these other beats. This is before World War II. And he saw the rise of the Nazis. And he also saw the persecution of the gays by the Nazis. And he was very well aware of it, as a gay person himself. And he actually, he married a Jewish lady there so she could escape Germany and move to America. Yeah, that's interesting. His first wife, yeah, it was just like a marriage of getting her a United States passport so she can move to New York City. But what was my point? My point was that he was looking for a job, and his dad was like, new people in the CIA. It wasn't the CIA yet. It wasn't the CIA yet. It was called the hell was it called? Whatever. But a job with the organization that would become the CIA. And he went there for the job interview, and he was so excited because this is perfect. He wanted to be a spy. He wanted to do all this stuff, and the guy there was one of the people that like lived with him in Harvard. And he was like, oh, you dislodged your firearm in the room, and you had that weird pet, and he didn't get the job. So actually his Harvard education ended up a hindrance in his job seeking.
That sucks. Yeah, well, it was the Office of Strategic Services, was a World War II intelligence agency.
OSS.
Establishment,
established. Yeah. So he applied for a He had tried to join the military a couple times. He had really bad eyesight, and they wouldn't let him in. He went and got a pilot's license, hoping to be a part of. So he could fly a plane. He got his pilot's license, but then they're like, "You have shitty eyesight. You know that you can't."
It seems like he's just looking for trouble his whole life, like looking for something where he could be either sneaky or violent or have control or have an experience.
Maybe. So, well, he had his formative years. He had a nanny. He may have been molested. He himself does not know. He had this nanny, and she was really weird, and she would do these like spells, and they would teach you. She taught him to do these like to curse people and stuff, put spells on people. And they had him and his brother out in the woods with her boyfriend. Then her boyfriend had no pants on. And then he was crying. And then he was really little. And then later his brother's going, do you think the nanny will get fired for what they did to you? And then the nanny did get fired, but he can't remember what happened. And he says it's been this constant like dark shadow in his, even when he's older, he's like, what happened to me? I don't know. But he feels this like guilt and weirdness and shame, and like I don't know, it's strange. Then he got all into that book You Can't Win.
No,
it's you would love it, Chris, because it's like a total hobo book from like the 1920s, man. It's like all about like being a hobo and getting heroin and like just jumping freight trains and like living in camps.
Who wrote it?
Oh, what is that guy's name, dude? He's got a cool name. But anyway, Burroughs was like a little kid and reading this book. You know what I mean? Did you Google it? You can't win. It
Yeah, written by Jack Black, published in 1926. I was going to
say Jack Black, and I'm like, dude, no, that can't be right. That's like, yeah.
It's an autobiographical account of Black's life as a hobo and a thief in the early 20th century American West.
He loved that cool. And he was like a little kid, and he was like, this is what I want to do. And it's funny because later he would write books and be like, and people would read him and be like, I want to go be a freak like that. He was like, spreading the tradition onward. But that was a huge influence on him, huge influence. And so then after he graduated from Harvard, he moved to Chicago and he became an exterminator, which he loved because he could drive all around the city aimlessly. Because what was going on was they made it a law that if you lived in an apartment in Chicago, by law, you were guaranteed to get pest treatment if you wanted it. So like everybody was able to get it and the government paid for it. So he would drive around, he would just go to these like big apartment buildings and he'd knock on the door and go, "Exterminator, you got any bugs, lady?" And it was his favorite job. And this is the job he'd have the longest. He worked hard for 9 whole months.
You think that's 9 whole months? Nice.
Longest job he ever had in his life.
Yeah, beat me. He beat my record. 9 whole months.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's enough to get.
From there, he, there was a murder right away. And if you want to know about William Burroughs, listen to our series. We have a whole series all about him on Murder Coaster podcast. Murder Coaster podcast, William Burroughs series. From his birth to his death, do everything. It's very immersive. We got quotes from Kerouac, Ginsberg, all those guys, and it begins with a murder. The Beat generation, because his friends in Chicago moved to New York, and that's where he met Jack Kerouac. That's where he met Allen Ginsberg, and this young kid, Lucien Carr, who actually grew up in there in St. Louis, Missouri. So he knew him from there. And then there was this guy, Carrar, who was an English teacher who was pretty much a pedophile. So much these guys are like kind of pedophiles. And I don't know, he killed him there he said he got sick of him just fucking with him all the time. And he came over to Burroughs' place after the murder, and then him and Jack Kerouac went and like dropped the knife down in the gutter, and Kerouac and William Burroughs ended up getting arrested as accomplices to the murder. This is when they all first met. This is like their first meetings and stuff, kind of. They would later, Jack Kerouac and William Burroughs would later write a book about it called "And the Hippos Boiled in Their Tanks." It went unpublished. I think it's published now maybe, but like it didn't got posthumously published. You know what I mean? Like they actually got an agent for it and everything, but they couldn't seem to get it published. And then, dude, so much bullshit, dude. So much drama with these guys.
It was based on a real life murder case involving their friend Lucien Carr, who, killed David Kramer in 1944. The title allegedly came from the news broadcast that Burroughs heard about at a fire at a circus where the announcer reported that the hippos were boiled in their tanks. Oh, man. Poor hippos.
Yeah. And then he decided he wanted to go live off the land and live in the woods and get a little place and grow weed. So that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Where was that?
He ended up buying a piece of land in Texas. He bought 2 pieces. First thing he did was he bought a share on a farm. Well, you know, it's complicated, but there was this farm, and he bought like a share of it. So he didn't even have to do anything. The farm was already going. It was like more like an investment, right? But then he bought a little homestead kind of near it. This is in Texas. Okay. And there was like an old ramshackle farmhouse on it. And it was like 38, 40 acres. And then he got some weed seeds. And at this point, he's with Joan. He is his wife. Well, he was in love with this woman, even though he was gay. God, it's just so complicated. I don't even know where to start, bud. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, is that the woman? Is that the woman he shot?
Yes.
So tell that story.
Well, they're growing pot together there in Texas, and she got pregnant, and they had a kid, and then they didn't know anything about growing weed at all. Nothing. They smoked weed just in joints, so they didn't. I don't even think they understood what it looked like. So they didn't separate the males from the females. And not only that, they didn't even cut the leaves off the buds. And then they also like harvested male plants and put them in there. And a male plant is nothing but yellow flowers. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So they basically like is garbage, dude. It's like trash. It was like seeds and male flowers. And he had put he was like, I'm going to be rich. It's like your typical hippie shit. I'm going to go out in the woods. I'm going to grow weed, take it back to my town, to New York City, and be rich. And he couldn't get anything for it. He couldn't even really sell. People were like, couldn't even smoke it. It was terrible. So then he got all depressed and he moved to New Orleans. He's doing tons of dope. He had been doing heroin in New York City. He got into that. He had this machine gun he had stolen somehow or something. And they traded it for a bunch of morphine syrettes, the things that soldiers use to if you're on the battlefield and you get hurt. Yeah. It's like a you ever see that?
It's Saving Private Ryan, yeah.
Like that kind of thing. He got a whole boxes of them and shit. And that was when he first got into he started doing those and realized he really liked that.
Holy shit. Yeah, that's what it's designed for.
So when he was in New Orleans, he got busted for heroin. And it was like a big deal down there. He said everyone was doing it. He said, and it was against the law to even be on. You didn't even have to have it on you. So if you were walking down the street and a cop grabbed you, pulled up your sleeve and you had track marks, that's all it took. You could go to prison just for having track marks. So he decided to skip out of the country and he moved to Mexico. By this point he's got a little kid, Billy. Now, they had the baby out there in Texas when they were out there growing weed. And, but when they were in New Orleans, Jack Kerouac goes and visits them, and it's really famous scene in On the Road. He comes down there, just Burroughs being Burroughs, saying how much the town sucks and there's nothing to do and taking him out the bars. It's a funny scene. But then they go to Mexico and he's down in Mexico and he becomes obsessed with yage, which is one of the main ingredients in ayahuasca.
Oh, okay.
And so he goes down, he leaves his wife and kid in Mexico and goes down to South America and he's looking for yage. And that trip, he actually never did find any. He wasn't able to get any. He would later go back and get some, but he had this gun and it shot low. He said it was a piece of shit gun. He didn't like it. He wanted to get rid of it, wanted to sell it, and arranged to meet this guy at an apartment above this bar to sell the gun. And him and Joan go there. And they were getting wasted. I guess there's 5 bottles of rum there, and it was kind of almost like a party going on. And he's got the gun out and he's looking at it, and they're waiting for the guy to show up to sell it to. And they're all these people are partying, and he's like, "Yeah, when I was down there in South America, I was shooting all kinds of animals. I was thinking maybe I should start hunting up here to help feed the family." And then Joan says, "If we had to rely on you for meat, we'd all starve." He's like, "Why don't we show them what a good shot old Bill is?" And she's like, "Okay." And he said they'd never done this before. It was just random right there. She took the glass she was drinking out of and put it on her head, turned her head and went, "I can't look. I hate the sight of blood." And he went to shoot the glass off her head, which he said was stupid because even if he had shot the glass would have gone flying over this small room. It would have been deafening. I mean, it was deafening. He shot. And she fell down and rolled off the chair, and he thought she was fucking around joking with him. And then the glass rolled up at his feet, unbroken.
Ooh.
And when he looked, there was blood pouring out of the side of her head. He shot her right in the fucking temple.
So what does he say about it after the fact?
He says he was possessed by a demon. He says that there's an inner part of him that maybe wanted to shoot her. He says that he was seized with remorse, pain, and guilt before it happened, meaning that it could have been a preordained thing, and he was feeling the effects of it before it even happened. He says that afterwards he went into such a depression and such a crazy state of trying to understand himself and understand what he had done and how it had happened, that the only way to deal with it was to write. And if it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have become a real writer. And he's trying to write himself out of it.
I mean, he's considered one of the greatest writers that we have in the 20th century. You think he stacks up to the other ones? I mean, was the juice worth the squeeze as far as having to shoot his wife to become the greatest?
You know, what is the greatest? That's subjective. That's an opinion.
Yeah.
He could turn a phrase. He was very experimental. He invented all kinds of weird things that I don't even really like the cut up method. Do you know about that? What they would do?
No.
They would write something and then take the paper and cut it into 4 pieces and then rearrange the pieces.
Oh, yeah.
And I think a lot of that stuff's just gobbledygook nonsense. Although that's how the word heavy metal was invented. He invented the word heavy metal, and he invented it like that, cutting up the paper and then heavy and metal next to each other. And he's like, "Oh, that sounds interesting."
Well, this was the idea behind most of this literature, was to take what we know about writing and then totally give it the acid wash and try to make it as psychedelic and fucking artsy fartsy as you can. Let's take a bunch of speed and then we'll just write moment by moment what's happening. Like, isn't that the road?
Yeah, Kerouac wrote The Road, all high on speed, on dexedrine, all in one piece of paper, one long roll of paper. Yeah. And then it's funny because, like, when we did the podcast, you know, we go narratively from his birth, and Kerouac just keeps popping up. You know what I mean? And like, Burroughs gets so before he had gone to Mexico, he had written this book called Junkie. It's just like barely 100 pages, just about him being a heroin addict, and it actually got published by this super small little publishing company that just published it as a cheap paperback, actually with another book. It wasn't even by itself. There was some other guys writing about heroin addicts too. And it was just sold in like drugstores and shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it was like literally like 65 cents or it was 35 cents, I think.
35 cents. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It was
original like, Confessions of an Unredeemed Drug Addict.
Yes, exactly. And Kerouac's like, I can't even get my shit. And then Allen Ginsberg had actually arranged that sale. And Allen Ginsberg went to the same people and were like, well, you should publish my friend Jack Kerouac stuff, and showed him on the road. And they're like, whoever wrote this sick. Publish it. It's like Jack Kerouac's always just moping around. Kerouac had a book published in like in 55 and called The Town and the City, but it just hadn't done well. It had just been a failure. Huh. And so he's just always moping around like everybody. And then Allen Ginsberg writes Hal, and Hal becomes huge. And Ginsberg's suddenly famous. And people are coming up to Jack Kerouac and going, aren't you that guy in that poem? You know? Yeah. He's just like this slopping around like, nobody likes my stuff. Nobody will publish me. You know what I mean? And like, but now, of course, we think of him as being the biggest star of all of them, right? But when it was all going down, he was like, you know.
And so when did Hal come out?
Oh God, when did Hal come out? Was it 59? I mean, you can Google it for me.
Yeah,
my numbers are getting. I think I'm 58. Maybe it was earlier. 50. What are you getting there?
Allen Ginsberg published his groundbreaking poem, Howl, was first published in 1956 as a part of a collection of Howl and other poems. So The Road, I guess, didn't get distribution till way later.
A couple years, yep. And after shooting his wife in Mexico, he basically bolted. He hung out for a while. What happened was he got a lawyer who was going to try to get him off, and the lawyer accidentally ran into somebody and killed them, and then with his car, I think he was drunk or something, and then the lawyer ran off. And then Burroughs is like, fuck, my goddamn lawyer killed somebody and ran off. Maybe I should just do the same thing. And then Burroughs ran off, and he went to Morocco because of Paul Bowles. You know who he is? He's a really big writer back in the day, really great writer. He was a esteemed writer. He was like a more in the you know what I mean, like because all the beats weren't really taken seriously a lot. You know what I mean? He was Paul Bowles is a very esteemed writer and part of the intelligentsia or whatever. But he lived out in Morocco and Tangiers, and so Burroughs went out there, and they did become friends. They became very good friends.
Did he write books while he was out in Morocco?
Whom?
Burroughs.
Yeah, that's what. So he goes there and he starts writing, and there was like this kind of in-joke mispronunciation kind of thing of Naked Lunch that Kerouac had gotten, and like he decides he's going to call this book The Naked Lunch, and it's like it's a funny weird, it's just like a goofy how the name came about, and he said he just wanted to shit his Harvard education out. And he would just type freeform, like you're saying, like, and he would ingest huge amounts of hashish. They would eat them in these cookies called majoun. And you know, when you eat that shit, it really fucks you up. So he'd eat these majoun cookies and smoke hash, because he was on the synthetic opiate, and he couldn't write on it. He said they just gave him writer's block, and it was made. It's called Equidol, and it was made in Germany. And it was like more powerful than heroin. And when they realized how addictive it was, they stopped making it. Like it was like dangerous. You know, it was like the OxyContin of the old days. And but it was still in Morocco in all the pharmacies, just boxes of it. And you could buy it without a prescription. You didn't need you could buy any drug without a prescription in Morocco at the time. It was well, not Morocco, but Tangiers specifically. Tangiers was an international zone. So it was run by like this whole conglomerate of different governments, France, the United States, England, like all these countries like ran this international zone. And that's why if you've read The Naked Lunch or you're familiar with William Burroughs, the interzone, where like he sets his like things, it's like the international zone, the interzone.
Ah, cool. Yeah. Yeah, Tangiers.
So he got all fucked up, and he got sober. And when he got sober, he got all this energy, started writing, and he would just like eat weed all day. His idea of being sober was to like, yeah, it was like eat weed all day and drink whiskey all night. He's like, sobriety is great. I'm really liking sobriety.
I'm on the health fast track.
Yeah. And he would just like fucking write, and then just take the paper and throw it on the floor. And then Paul Bowles came and was like, "What are you doing? What are all these papers on the floor?" Like, "This is what I'm working on." He's like, how will it even be legible? And he's like, I think I'll figure it out. And then Kerouac showed up, and they were like just trying to gather him up off the floor. They had like rat shit and piss on him and shit. But Kerouac only lasted a couple of weeks, and he bolted. And then Allen Ginsberg came, and Allen Ginsberg and him, you know, they had been lovers. Burroughs had fallen in love with him. But at first, you know, Allen Ginsberg was just a little kid when they first met, like 18-year-old kid who was like looked up to this worldly traveler, you know. And but now Allen Ginsberg had written how he was famous, you know, and they were just really good friends. And Ginsberg helped him get it all together, fucking put it all up. And he's like, "I'm going to get it published. Don't you worry, we're going to get this shit published," you know. Yeah. And bound it and got it together, and it actually smelled bad. And Ginsberg brought it to the publisher in Paris, who had published Henry Miller, and he had published Lolita.
Oh wow!
You know, so like it was a porn. They published porn, and he would. So this is what they would do. This is really check this. This is hilarious. He would come up with these titles, like these crazy saucy titles, like Wet Lips. Right. And then he would cut a whole bunch of them, and then he would find all these naughty bookshops and like touristy novelty places. Right. And he would send them the catalog going, "Which of these pornographic books do you want?" And they would order all the books, and the books hadn't been written. They were just titles this guy made up. And then he would go to this place called the Beat Hotel in Paris, where all these writers lived, and be like, "All right, I need someone to write this. I need someone to write this," and give him the title and say, like, "Write me a bunch of porn." You know what I mean? And then someone would a writer would write him a pornographic book, and they would sell it and send it to all the shops. And then the police would come, find out which books were pornographic, ban the books, but the book had to go through court. It had to go be seen by the judge. The judge had to ban it. By the time that it was done, all the editions were sold out. Then he would fucking come up with a whole bunch of new titles, start all over. Every year, it was just this round, and every year, whatever they wrote would get outlawed and banned. But by then, all the copies were sold out, and they would just write new ones. Wow. And Yeah, isn't that cool? They were doing so good that someone's like, you should publish this book, Lolita. Dude, no one will publish it because it's all, but it's really literature. You know what I mean? And he published it. And like, what happened was, I think someone from the New York Times or something. Yeah, Graham Greene wrote a review for it for like the New York Times or something, and was like, this is like the greatest book written this year. And, you know, and people are calling it porno, and it's not, you know. And but anyway, he's like, you should publish The Naked Lunch. And he handed him the manuscript. And he was like, it smells bad. He's like, what is on this? He's like, it's like rat shit on it and stuff. Oh, and some of the pages were chewed by mice and shit. And he's like, God, this is an insult to even give this to me. Fuck you. Get the fuck away from me. And wouldn't publish shit. And then, like a year or so later, some college literary journals published parts of it. And they got arrested, and then they got their shit seized by the post office. And when the publisher in Paris heard that, he's like, well, this Naked Lunch is getting some controversy over there. Maybe I'll publish it. He's like, I'm really good at publishing shit that no one else will publish. Getting it out there, I'll publish it. And then reconsidered and published it. And they went to Burroughs, and they're like, look, I'll give you $600 and publish it if you can get it together in 3 weeks, you know, and like in a printable. And so he would go through each of the little sections. He would proofread and get all perfect and send to the galleys, and the galleys would send them back. And the random order that each of these little sections came back is the random order that the book was published in.
Wow.
Because he was all about Kafka. He loved Kafka. So in his idea, what he was doing is writing these Kafka-esque little short stories. Like, you know, Kafka wrote these, but he was like, they would kind of flow into each other and turn into each other and morph and change and grow out of each other. So instead of like a book of, here's a story, here's another story, here's another story, it's like a book with all these stories, but they're like, and morphing into each other and shit. It's very bleak, unsettling stuff.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Kafka or the life of William S. Burroughs, I mean, this is about real experiences and stuff of his real degenerate sort of life.
Yeah, but it was science fiction.
Yeah, with the science fiction twist.
So many science fiction writers were inspired by him. It's crazy. Yeah, he invented the word Blade Runner.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Crazy.
He invented cyberpunk, you know, like...
Oh, William Burroughs. So where is Neal Cassady during all of this? Did they ever cross paths?
Oh, hell yeah. He met Neal Cassady when he was growing pot in Texas. And Neal Cassady came out there with Allen Ginsberg. And at this point, Allen Ginsberg and Neal Cassady were a couple kind of ish. But Neal Cassady wasn't really gay. He was just in for kicks. He would fuck anything, you know what I mean? And but he really liked girls. Like he was into girls. And they get to Texas, and Neal Cassady's like runs off and like finds some chick and is like fucking her and shit. And Allen Ginsberg gets all pissed and stuff. Like, you know what I mean? He's like heartbroken because Allen Ginsberg he's not really interested in women too much. He's, you know, as a rule, I mean, he's been with women, but whatever. So whatever. Yeah. He's like, I'm going to join the merchant marines or whatever. I'm joining the military. I'm leaving right there in Texas. And he does. And then like, so now William Burroughs is stuck there with Neal Cassady, who he didn't really know. And Neal Cassady's being Neal Cassady, and he's doing tons of speed, and he starts like flirting with Joan. and Burroughs wasn't that impressed with him. he's like, who is this maniac? You know what I mean? But then they had to take all the weed back to New York City. And Neal Cassady could do one thing really well, fucking drive. So Neal Cassady drove the whole way from Texas to New York City with a whole back seat filled with weed.
Yeah. He drove the bus.
All that risk. But it was unsellable.
He drove. Well, didn't he drive the other buses too? That were.
Well, that would be later. Yeah.
Yeah. He became
like 10 years later.
He became the driver.
Not even 10 years though. Of Ken Kesey's bus further. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens a little bit later? Obviously, he keeps becomes sort of grandfathered into the scene. I mean, where is he during the late 60s? Burroughs.
Yeah, so Burroughs was always really dark, and he was right there when the 60s started because and fundamental to it, because what happened was Allen Ginsberg went and hooked up with a Harvard professor called Timothy Leary. And Timothy Leary had been working with famous writer Aldous Huxley, and they had been eating mushrooms together. And Timothy Leary became sure that psychedelics could open up a whole new world, like could open up this whole new thing, like change the world, bring on a revolution, a psychedelic revolution. And Allen Ginsberg's like, well, you got to meet my friend William Burroughs. He knows everything that there is to know about drugs. And they went out there and they gave all these mushrooms. They all ate mushrooms together. And it's so funny because it's like Timothy Leary eats like 4 or 5 of these psilocybin capsules. Allen Ginsberg eats like 4 or 5 of these psilocybin capsules. William Burroughs grabs them, eats 15 of them. He's such a fucking maniac, dude. And then proceeds to have a terrible trip. He's like just losing his mind. He's having all these awful hallucinations. And he's like, that shit was terrible. I don't like it. You know what I mean? And, but he was like really kissing Timothy Leary's ass because Timothy Leary had a bunch of money and like, well, Harvard was paying him all these money. You know what I mean? It was like, and they were both old, I guess, Harvard men, whatever. So Burroughs actually went out there to Harvard and hung out. And he said that he thought everything they were doing was a waste of money. He thought it was stupid. He was like, they just want to like sit and meditate, like do yoga and shit. It's the beginning of the 60s, it's not. And then, he left them and went back to Morocco. And then right after he left, Timothy Leary was given a new drug that he discovered, LSD. And then, of course,
the rest is history.
The rest is history.
Which we should cover on this program as much as we can, as this whole time period is so cool.
It really is. It's funny because like my podcast is a true crime podcast focusing on murders, and we have endlessly discussed all of this. Like, we do William Burroughs' life. There's a bunch of murders involved in it, but we also like we covered like this. You ever hear that band Fang? Yeah. So he was an LSD dealer, and we get all about LSD and that. Oh, and then we did a bunch of Charlie Manson stuff. Of course, we did Charlie Manson. So we've talked a lot about, the 60s and LSD. And for some reason, Ken Kesey just constantly getting brought up in our podcast. I can't even remember all the different reasons why, but and the Grateful Dead. We're always talking about the Grateful Dead. It's just, they're just like pervasive, dude. We did Leonard Lake this week. You know what, that scumbag? No. He was like a Vietnam vet who ended up like living on a commune in Mendocino, and he was growing weed in Mendocino, and he even lived up in Humboldt for a while. Super, super scary, like the scariest, most evil, disgusting motherfucker. But of course, he was like in the Bay Area, like, part of that hippie scene, and all that history just gets brought up. He was with this guy Otter, who became a really famous hippie. He just happened to be living on the commune, and the guy had made a unicorn goat. Oh, I don't like the sound of this. I don't know. It was a goat with a single horn that grew out of his head. And then this guy, Leonard Lake, would like take the goat to Renaissance festivals and use it to like try to groom girls to do whatever. Yeah, it's sad. Ringling Brothers actually ended up buying the goat eventually, and the goat went on circus. And then a listener, listen to this. Do you want to hear the craziest shit? A listener of the podcast sent me an email today going, I was a little kid in 1980, and my parents took me to the Renaissance Festival, and I fucking met that goat and hung out with that goat. It's one of my clearest memories and shit. They're like, I hung out with that goat all fucking day. She's like, my mom was like 22 at the time, and fucking, he was like flirting with her and stuff. He's like, listening to this podcast gave me fucking chills. Yeah. Holy shit. She like flashbacks. You didn't realize that the guy was a serial killer until like just now. Yeah. God, that's scary, isn't it? Isn't that nuts? What's the story? And I have to ask you about this thing you posted about this clown. There was like oh yeah. What's the story here? What? He was king of the clowns, dude. He was
tell the people.
All right, he was born in 1900, and he was born into show business. He was like doing like, I don't know what do they do that shit like? What do they? It's not Ziegfeld Follies, but like, you know, that carnival kind of like acting. What the hell was the main vaudeville? Yes, his parents did vaudeville, and he's doing vaudeville. He's like up on the stage when he was like 6. And then he became a clown. He was a trapeze artist. He became king of the clowns. Started working for Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus. He invented all these clown acts. A lot of them with little people. They called them midgets back then. You know, midget clowns. So he was like the first person to shoot a midget out of a cannon, and he would just these crazy acts. He'd make these props. So he made this like huge monster clown prop, and then like they would have this big crusher, and it would crush the monster clowns, kind of like a guar concert, and fucking all these like little people clowns would all come out of it. And he's like famous for inventing this shit, dude. They called him like a producer clown because he wasn't just like any kind. He wrote the skits and shit.
When was this?
This is like the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s.
Do you remember the guy's name?
So in the 50s, yeah, Young. Like the you know, Freud's guy, Carl Jung.
Oh, Carl Jung.
Yeah, but his name's George Jung.
Oh, his name's George Jung. Like the guy from
It's
Blow.
Young. It's pronounced Young.
I know.
Right, it is like the guy from Blow. Right clown. Right dead clown. It should pop right up.
A killer clown.
No, he wasn't a killer.
Oh, he wasn't a killer.
No.
Oh,
I have another one that was a killer clown.
No, but don't get our wires
killed. Well, what happened was he became the face of Sugar Smacks, which were the most sugar covered cereal ever made. It was at 56% sugar. Over half of it was just sugar, and they would put his face on the boxes, and he was the star clown. But then he was like old. He was in his 60s, and he was in New York City. They were doing a run there at Madison Square Garden. He had a motel room right next to Madison Square Garden, and for some reason, he had a heroin-addicted prostitute in his room. No one really explained why he had her in her room. And she let her boyfriend in, and they took a brass nozzle from a fire hose. You know those fire hoses, the old school ones? And they caved his head in with it.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm laughing.
It's
been a long time. I got over it. This was like 1964, I want to say, yeah. I'm pretty positive it was 1964.
I mean, what's the protocol here? You can laugh at the death of a clown, right? There's some poetic about it. Anyway,
even when they get their head caved in.
Yeah. Well, he had his troubles, right? He was.
Did he have his troubles? I don't think so. He was happily married. Everyone who said he's a stand-up guy, he was never known to have done drugs or have anything. No, he didn't have any troubles. As a matter of fact, he had a place in Florida where him and his wife would live. He had grandkids, and they would live in Florida during the off months and tour with Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, which was the biggest circus ever that had ever existed. And when he was killed, they were doing standing room only, sold out shows for like a couple week run at Madison Square Garden. He was on the top, and he was the head of the bill. He was at the top of the shit. He was the face of Kellogg's cereal. He had it going on, man.
As high of a place that a clown can get to.
He was as high as a clown can get. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He was literally the king of the clowns. That's what they called him.
Yeah.
The killer clown, that was in San Francisco in the 1800s. Sounds like something like an old. Yeah, it sounds like a Stephen King story, doesn't it? So like there was this kid, and he was selling peanuts and candy at this like street circus, and it's a Spanish street circus, and this big old clown came up to him, grabbed him by the ankles, started swinging him around, and swung him to death somehow. He swung him till blood started pouring out of his nose and fucking spraying the crowd. Jesus. And then they arrested the clown, and they said that he was a mentally defective clown. This is what the newspaper said. Quote, mentally defective clown kills boy by swinging. And then they found him not guilty because by reason of stupidity. And it ends up he was a fucking suspect in several other murders. So they brought him back again. And then he got found not guilty again by reason of whatever. And then he assaulted a police officer and he ended up doing some hard time. And then he got out.
You can't.
He didn't kill him, though. He just fucked with him. Yeah. And then he ended up in a mental institution.
Did he have a good look at least? I mean,
I don't know. There's no pictures. I can't find. There's no pictures. There's no photos.
Like an 1800s.
They said he was tall. Yeah.
You know, you usually think of the 1950s.
So the kid was buried in Yerba Buena Cemetery in San Francisco. Yeah. And then after the earthquake, they just built over it. They didn't even move the bodies. And now it's like the Asian Museum of Art and Library is over top of it. And so, here's the kicker. So you think, well, that's fucked up because that poor kid who was killed by a clown could just have like this library built over top of him in San Francisco. But no, apparently grave robbers would notoriously target that place because the elevation, moisture levels, and temperature were so perfect for, I can't remember the word. There's a word when the skin of a corpse, instead of rotting, turns to soap. And it was perfect for that. So the dead corpses would just turn into a soap. And then the grave robbers would take the corpses, just peel off all the flesh, mix it up, and make soap out of it.
Whoa, Jesus Christ. So your dead skin cells.
What's the word? It's like a fancy word, dude. It's hard to say.
Yeah, so you're saying when the skin rots...
Write corpse wax. Just write corpse wax.
Corpse wax?
Yeah, it'll pop right the fuck up, dog.
I gotta head to Amazon and get a liter of corpse wax. It's also known as...
There's the word, yeah.
Adipocera. Who knows? It sounds Latin or Greek.
I learned how to say it for the podcast. Adipocera.
Adipocera, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a wax-like organic substance that forms when the fat of a corpse undergoes a process called saponification.
Saponification just means soap making. That's all saponification means is fat going through a chemical process.
Yeah, anaerobic bacterial hydrolysis of fat in tissue. That's good to know. Well, when I go, you can make me into some nice bathroom soap, mix me in with the potpourri, and let people wash their shitty hands with me.
I know they should, because it's made by environmental factors. I mean, we're masters of manipulating nature. I'm sure we can make vaults that had the proper humidity, temperature, everything, that we could just turn our corpses into soap, and it would eliminate so many things. We would have graveyard space will be opened up. We would have free soap. You could think of your loved ones. You could take a shower. You'd be like, "Oh, mom, getting all clean and shit." This is it. And is it vegan? I don't think it's.
Well,
when they died of natural causes.
Natural causes.
Unless they were killed for the soap.
That's the thing is, well, that's what they say with animals. It's you can just use the manure, but then pretty soon you're exploiting them just to get the manure. So the
manure comes from plants that, butcher them.
Yeah, but pretty soon you're going to be killing people just to get the soap. You're like, but I'm dirty, but I'm not dead yet.
Well, no, we covered a couple serial killers that did soap. There was a really famous Italian lady who did it, and there was also this Spanish guy who said he was a werewolf. He was one of the first werewolf trials ever in Spain, and this is this is 1920s and 1930s even. The werewolf was like, "I'm a werewolf." He was a werewolf soap maker in Spain, and what he would do is he would guide people over the mountains. So if you needed to go up over the mountains and shit, dude, he'd be like, "Oh, I'll guide you up through there." And when he got you up in the mountains, he would kill you, turn you into soap, come back down and go to the farmers markets and be selling this fancy ass soap.
That's like a new Blumhouse movie.
People.
It's called Sherpa. They're gonna take you up the mountain and never come back.
Well, you come back, but you're just soap now.
Well, that's no deal.
And then they would also see him relatives would come and they'd be like, "Aren't you the person who disappeared with my aunt?" isn't that my aunt's dress you're selling? Yeah, I'll buy some soap.
Yeah, something fishy about that guy, but good
So
soap.
when he went to court and they're like, what's your defense? He's like, well, I'm a werewolf. And they say, well, turn into a werewolf right here, right now. He's like, well, I can't really do that. The spell's been lifted. But I can assure you that I would turn into a werewolf and I would wake up and there would just be, everybody would be soap. And yeah, fascinating, huh?
Is that a proper defense? Can you get out of crimes with
lycanthropy? It did not work for him. All right, so check. We talked about this already, remember? But it just worked here in America a few years ago.
Yeah, what was this
Dylan
case?
Haroff.
Oh, was it the conservative cannibal?
Yes.
No. Oh, okay.
Yes, the conservative cannibal got found not guilty by lycanthropy. Yeah.
He's eating people in the garage, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's haunted me. You told me that story almost a year ago, and it's been.
No, it's only been 6 months.
Yeah, that was still.
You know how I know? It was right around Halloween, and we got 6 months to Halloween. We're halfway there.
Oh, that's your time of year. It's like a freak Christmas.
That's how I gauge everything. It's like how close and how far away we are from Halloween.
Yeah.
So happy less than 6 months to happy halfway to Halloween.
Yeah, we need a summer Halloween. That would be nice.
Every day's Halloween.
I love Halloween time because the movies. To go and put on an old campy, 1980s, 1970s, 80s is the hot spot for real stupid horror movies. But God, we always talk about. I just saw the Kindred. Have you seen the Kindred?
Yeah, that's an old school one. Yeah,
I love that. These little creatures.
When I was a kid. Right?
Yeah. The House. I watched House. I watched The Gate.
Oh, man, you're getting old school. Slumber Party Massacre? Oh,
yeah, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there one? There's one that I forget. Oh, Chopping Mall. Have you seen that one?
Chopping Mall, yeah.
I always thought it was like a slasher, but it's like about this robot that goes around.
It's a robot, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Slumber Party Massacre is an electric guitar with a drill in the end, and he's got to play the guitar solo to make the drill turn.
Yeah. No, that's my shit. I mean, all these new horror movies are so color corrected. It's insane. Oh, you know what I did see?
Well, but they're arty, dude. It's like it's a new. I love the new horror movies. I don't know, but they're so arty.
Some of them are all right, but others are.
I love them.
The color correction is too much sometimes.
Oh, the color correction,
or like when you're color grading too much, and you have like, it's really cold looking, or blue, or dark.
Right.
Like when it's too dark. Right. 80s movies were just like. Look like they were filmed with a video camera. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Where it's like, oh, that's real. Uh-huh. That's more scary. No,
Texas Chainsaw Massacre was filmed with really cheap film, and it's got that like kind of over saturated look.
Well, that's the 70s too.
Yeah, that was the 70s. Yeah, that was the early 70s. Oh no, that was like, what was that? 76. Yeah, I think The Exorcist was 73.
Yeah. Rosemary's Baby is 68.
Yeah, that's a great film. I love Roman Polanski movies.
That probably set the tone. As not saying anything about his other work.
No, and then there was Hammer films. You know what I mean? You can go out, and before that, you had awesome gothic shit like Dracula.
Right. Going back to Bela Lugosi. Yeah. Yeah, you know what I saw, though, the other day? I know you're going to love this because you probably fucking love this movie. I saw Midsummer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you see that? What'd you think?
Of course, I saw it in the movie theater, man. Well, I'm a big fan of the director and stuff. I like
Astor.
Mm-hmm. Did you see? I liked Midsummer. A lot of people hate it. Yeah. I thought it was great. I think.
Did you see Beau is Afraid?
Yes, several times. It's one of the greatest films ever made.
You really think so? Wow. Yes. Yeah, see, I
saw it and I was like, I went back to the movie theater, saw it again, dude. I was like, what the fuck did I just see, man?
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Terribly fascinating.
I can't think of another movie like it. Maybe Pink Floyd, The Wall, or something like.
Right.
The fuck, and or like a Jodorowsky or something like Holy Mountain. Like, what the fuck was this?
Yeah, a psychedelic thing, but way more modern and way more with different. I mean, El Topo.
And there was a story. There was this, you know what I mean? It's your classic hero's journey. Yeah. He's going to see his mom died, and he's going home to see his mom. You know what I mean? Because people are like, there's not even a story. And you're like, what are you talking about? He's going to see his mom. It's like, it's like Ulysses or something. All the adventures he goes on as he's on this journey homeward. It's literally a hero returning home.
Yeah. It's like Odysseus or something. I mean, But
he called it. You know what Ari Aster called it? A Jewish Wizard of Oz.
Oh right, yeah. Which is kind of cute. I mean, it's not as good as Wizard of Oz. Nothing can beat the Wizard of Oz. No, but this.
I mean, I loved it. I thought it was just insane, dude. It blew my mind.
My favorite part, it was the first part, though.
That was
the first segment. Is
so
just
weird
so
and dark. So dark. So
apocalyptic is just my favorite thing. But I think he also
telling him to turn the shit down and stuff. That is so funny. Turn the music down.
The note comes sliding under the door all far.
That's so scary.
I'm like, I don't know.
When he's in the bathtub and he looks up and that guy's sitting above him, sweating on him.
Yeah. His sneaker. He's shaking.
Yeah.
He's about to fall.
Oh my God, it's so good.
That's fucking scared the shit out of me. But yeah, by the time he gets to the play and everything, and
I would be thinking about that play. I was thinking about that play yesterday. I was just like lost in thought about it, like what it meant, what was happening. God, it's so weird, dude.
Yeah, I mean, and then it's the fact that it's narrating something about himself. He sits down and it's telling his story, his life, but then he flashes.
But it's not his life.
But then it's not
his life at all. He's never got married. He never had kids.
Yeah, but he sees himself in that character.
He sees himself. He becomes it.
Yeah,
so weird.
But ultimately, I think at the end, he's trying to make some fucking come to some realization about his childhood, his mother, and his sort of whatever the genetic legacy.
He failed, though. He fails.
Right.
And then he dies.
Doesn't he die? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, they take him out. And it's like, you're a loser. You deserve all the guilt that you felt.
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Oh, man.
Well, yeah, I was just... It's a great movie. Really psychedelic. I have to watch it again.
What about when his dad's just a big dick? His dad was just a big, huge dick in the fucking the attic.
The scary guy comes out and stabs him.
He's like this. He comes out of nowhere. Yeah, bursts through the window.
I was trying to figure out what the scene with Nathan Lane meant too. What are they trying to say about these people?
Lost love.
Holding them captive though in this weird way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I don't know.
So I promise you, I'll take you tomorrow and stuff. But
yeah, that was like classic Humboldt shit or something.
Right. I'll take you to town next week.
And then the daughter comes and starts guzzling the paint. Oh my God! Yeah. It's so funny.
There were some liberties there because it's obviously really beautiful anytime you drink of that color paint on the juxtaposed wall of some other color and stuff. So it was really cinematic in that way. I'm like, you're just doing that because it looks good. But what does it mean?
The movie looked good too. The whole movie was very cinematic. Movie was
super
sexy. The play was amazing. Didn't then when it turned into a cartoon,
turned into fucking origami or whatever you call it, stop motion. I love Joaquin Phoenix. He's our most prized vegan, so I love his work. And
is he vegan? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's one of our most prominent animal rights guys. Yeah,
cool.
Him and Ricky Gervais. Yeah. Well, let's end it here and let's talk right after this. We did a full hour, and everybody who's still listening, go and check out Murder Coaster Podcast. Matthew Brockmeyer, he's a great author. Books available, whatever. I doubt anybody's still listening. If you are, let us know in the comments.
What? Why would they not keep still listening?
I'm just bitter on humans. If there's no explosions or any tits in the first 5 minutes, they probably go wander off because they see a bird or something. I don't know. Murder! Death, mayhem, blood, guts, gore, cannibalism, soapy skin. Yeah. No. Well, we'll get together more often because I'm getting back into this month. May is going to be a big month. We're going to keep blasting this bullshit out to the cosmos. We're doing good. The podcast's going good. No complaints. I'm making more writing articles, but it's all going good. We're trying to save the world. One gripe at a time. But all right, well, signing off to everybody. Say bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening.